The invoice came in a bright yellow envelope, slapped on my front door like a parking ticket. I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift at my construction firm, still wearing my steel toe boots and covered in concrete dust. The envelope read, "Urgent payment required," and underneath, in bold, "Street maintenance fee $1,200. I live on a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburban Georgia neighborhood. I've owned this house for 11 years, paid it off early. I built half the driveways on this block. And now the HOA, led by the ever-chipper, always passive-aggressive chairwoman, Alayna Fairgrove, was trying to bill me for street maintenance. On a public road. I pulled the letter out and read the breakdown. It was signed by Alayna herself, printed on HOA letterhead with the usual flowery nonsense. To ensure our beautiful community maintains its charm, all residents are required to contribute toward the recent street resurfacing project. Street resurfacing? I knew for a fact that hadn't happened. Next morning, I walked outside just as Alayna was making her rounds, clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses shading the judgy look she always had on her face. "Alayna," I called out. She turned with that fake smile. "Xander, lovely morning, isn't it? I hope you received the notice. Payment is due by Friday." I held up the paper. "This is for street maintenance?" "Yes," she said, flipping through her clipboard like she was about to read me my rights. "The board approved an emergency project after the last storm. You probably didn't notice, but there were cracks forming near the drains. We hired a contractor to patch things up quickly." "Which contractor?" I asked. "Oh, a small local team, family run," she said, waving me off. Anyway, the board agreed that each household should pay their fair share. I stared down the street. Not a single square inch looked repaved or even touched. I own a construction company. My crew lays roads for a living. I know what fresh asphalt looks like. I know what it smells like too. "You paid for this using HOA funds?" I asked. "Well," she hesitated, "we fronted it, yes, but now it's time for residents to reimburse the association." "Did you get permits?" "The HOA doesn't need permits for emergency work," she snapped, her smile fading a notch. "It was a community decision." That was a lie. "I attend every HOA meeting. There was no vote, no discussion, no mention of any work." I nodded. "All right, I'll take care of it." That was the last thing I said before walking back inside and opening my laptop. I pulled up the property records. The street was owned and maintained by the city. Not private, not the HOA's responsibility. Then I checked the construction permits for the area over the last 90 days. Nothing, no permits filed. No contractors listed, no work scheduled, so I made a few calls. My company, Ridgetop Infrastructure, had a few city contracts nearby. I had extra materials and crew availability, and I had an idea. If Alayna wanted to charge me for imaginary roadwork, fine. I'd show her what real roadwork looked like, and I'd send her the damn invoice. By Thursday morning, I had the invoice drafted, stamped, and printed on Ridgetop Infrastructure letterhead. It detailed labor, materials, and equipment costs for unauthorized curbside milling and drainage patching, totaling $15,000. I addressed it directly to the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, Atten, Alayna Fairgrove, with payment due in 10 days. I didn't mail it. I dropped it off in person at the HOA's drop box, conveniently located right outside Alayna's house. By Friday, she was on my doorstep. "You're joking," she said, holding the invoice like it had personally insulted her. "This must be some kind of mistake." "No mistake," I said, leaning on the frame. "You claimed street maintenance was done. You charged me for it. My company does that kind of work, so I billed you accordingly." "That's how this works, right?" Her cheeks flushed a deeper shade of pink than the peonies she had planted along her walkway. "You can't charge the HOA for work you didn't do." "Exactly," I said. "And yet, here we are." She opened her mouth, closed it again, then flared her nostrils like she was about to sneeze but decided against it. "You're being deliberately difficult." "I'm being precise," I said. "And while we're on the subject, I checked with the city. That road's public." You didn't have the authority to hire anyone to work on it, let alone bill residents for imaginary repairs. Her features tightened. You're not qualified to interpret zoning law. I'm a licensed contractor with municipal contracts, I replied. I don't interpret, I comply. You, on the other hand, authorized work on city property without permits, without oversight, and billed residents for it. That's fraud. She blinked. I've already filed a report with the County Public Works Department. We'll see what they think. She turned on her heel and stormed back down my walkway without another word. By Monday, things escalated. A letter slipped into every mailbox in the neighborhood. Official looking, with the HOA's logo stamped in the corner. It claimed I was harassing the board and spreading misinformation, and it warned that legal action may be taken against residents who attempt to intimidate volunteer leadership. Nice try. I gathered every neighbor I could, 13 households total, and invited them to my backyard that evening. I rolled out coolers, grilled burgers, and brought out folding chairs. Once everyone had settled, I stood up with a thick folder in my hand. I've got copies for everyone, but here's the short version, I said. The HOA billed us for street maintenance that never happened. There were no permits. No contractors, no work. I've pulled city records, filed a complaint with the county, and submitted a Freedom of Information request to see if any payments actually went out. Marcia, who lived 4 doors down and worked nights at the local hospital, leaned forward. So the money they collected, where did it go? That's what I want to find out, I said. Alayna told me the streets were assessed by an independent inspector, said Greg, a retired firefighter. She even showed me a digital report. Did she print it? I asked. He shook his head. No. Just flashed it on her iPad. I turned to my laptop and opened a PDF. This is the city's latest infrastructure report, I said. Dated 2 weeks before her so-called emergency project. No issues listed on our block, no recommendations for repairs. And no authorization for private groups to touch anything. A few neighbors exchanged glances. The mood shifted from curiosity to concern. Can we demand an audit? Marcia asked. If we get enough signatures, yes, I said. And if we find out funds were misused, that's grounds for removal. Greg nodded. Then where do I sign? We had 15 signatures by the time the sun dipped below the fence line. Tuesday morning, I dropped the petition off at the county clerk's office. That same afternoon, a city inspector arrived on our street, clipboard in hand, shaking his head as he walked the length of the curb. He took photos, measured the drains, and politely asked if I had a moment. Mr. Ridgeway, he said, checking his notes, you reported unauthorized work being billed to homeowners. That's right. Well, nothing here shows signs of recent maintenance. No new fill, no sealant, no patching. Whatever was claimed, it didn't happen here. Would your department be willing to put that in writing? He nodded. Already have. We're forwarding it to the city attorney. That night, Alayna rang my doorbell again. This time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man in a suit, mid-50s, thinning hair, holding a slim leather folder. Xander Ridgeway, the man asked. Yes, I'm Peter Colton. I represent the Willow Creek HOA. I crossed my arms. Great, we're skipping to legal threats now, he cleared his throat. We're here to offer a resolution. The board is willing to void the maintenance fee for your property and issue a clarification letter to the community. I didn't answer right away. What about the other residents? I asked. They're not contractors, Alayna interjected. You had the professional background to question the invoice. Others didn't. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. So you're admitting you expected residents to pay a fake bill because they lacked the knowledge to challenge it? Peter tugged at his collar. We're trying to avoid escalation. Too late, I said. The city's involved, the county clerk knows, and unless you provide a full financial breakdown showing where every dollar from those fees went, I'm not accepting anything. Alayna's eyes darted toward the lawyer, who shifted uncomfortably. I'll give you until Friday, I said, then turned and walked back inside. By Thursday, the HOA's treasurer, an older man named Henry who rarely spoke at meetings, called me directly. "I didn't sign off on those invoices," he said. "They were processed without board approval." "Can you prove that?" "I've got the email chain." Alayna bypassed the vote, said it was time sensitive. "I'll forward it to you." He did. And I included it in my complaint to the local district attorney's office. Friday morning, the DA's office reached out. "We're opening an inquiry into the Willow Creek HOA," the investigator said. "We've received multiple reports of unauthorized financial activity. We'd like to schedule a statement with you next week." Just as I hung up, an HOA-wide email landed in everyone's inbox. Subject line: HOA leadership transition announcement. Alayna Fairgrove had resigned, no apology, no explanation. Just a cold goodbye and a note that unexpected personal matters required her attention. That afternoon, a city code enforcement officer began reviewing HOA financial records under subpoena. The rest of us, we started planning a new board, one with actual transparency, and I waived the invoice. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because the lesson had already been delivered with interest. By the following Monday, a plain white sedan parked near the HOA's clubhouse. A man and woman stepped out, both in suits, both carrying brown folders and serious expressions. I watched from my truck, parked across the street. They weren't city officials. They were from the district attorney's white-collar crimes division. The woman glanced up, caught me watching, and gave a polite nod before entering the building. The door shut behind them, and I didn't see either of them come out for nearly 2 hours. Afterward, I got a call from the same investigator who had reached out last week, a woman named Dana Calder. Her voice was calm, but she didn't bother with small talk. "We've reviewed the HOA's financial records and cross-checked them with the city's infrastructure expenditures," she said. "There are significant discrepancies." "How significant?" I asked. "Over $39,000 collected from residents under false pretenses. We've flagged multiple transfers to a limited liability company registered in Alabama. Guess who's listed as the primary officer?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "Alayna Fairgrove," Dana confirmed. "The LLC was formed 2 months before the so-called repair project. No employees. No equipment registered. No tax filings. It's a shell." That explained why no contractor had shown up, why the road hadn't been touched, and why the funds vanished into thin air. She hadn't just bent the rules, she had rerouted them into her personal bank account. "We're executing a search warrant on her residence tomorrow morning," Dana continued. "We'd appreciate it if you could provide a formal statement before then." I agreed to meet her at the county office that afternoon. By the time I walked out 2 hours later, I had signed a notarized affidavit detailing everything from the fake invoice to the city inspector's findings. Down to the evening, we gathered in my backyard and pieced it all together. Tuesday morning, the street outside Alayna's house was lined with county vehicles. A black SUV with tinted windows, 2 unmarked cruisers. I recognized the sheriff himself stepping out, flanked by deputies. They knocked. No answer, then they announced, "This is the Cobb County Sheriff's Office. We have a warrant to search the premises." Within 30 seconds, the door opened. Alayna stood in the threshold, wearing a robe and an expression that had never made an appearance at any HOA meeting. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no smile, just defeat. They escorted her to the porch as the investigators slipped inside. Later that day, word spread fast. I didn't have to say a thing. The neighborhood group chat lit up with messages about the sheriff's raid. Several residents who had kept quiet during the early stages were suddenly emboldened, calling for a full recount of every financial decision the board had made under Alayna's leadership. By Wednesday, the interim board, led by the treasurer Henry and 2 volunteers from the petition group, announced an emergency open meeting. Not at the clubhouse, but at the local library's community room, where the HOA couldn't control the narrative or the sign and sheet. I arrived 10 minutes early. The room was already half full, chairs pulled close, a dry erase board at the front with a single line scribbled across it. Restoring trust. Henry tapped the mic. We'll begin with transparency, he said. We've retained an independent auditor, no one affiliated with the HOA. They'll be reviewing 5 years of financial records. He adjusted his glasses and glanced at his notes. We've also been contacted by the state's Department of Community Affairs. They're launching a formal investigation into HOA mismanagement. Then he looked up. And finally, we've received confirmation that former chairwoman Fairgrove has been charged with felony fraud, wire transfer misconduct, and unlawful use of association funds. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back cursed under their breath. I stood when Henry asked if I'd be willing to speak. I didn't set out to tear down the HOA, I said. I just wouldn't pay for something that never happened, and I wasn't going to let anyone else do it either. I glanced around the room. I know some of you were worried, afraid to speak up. But this kind of thing only works when people stay silent. So if you ever feel like something's off, ask questions. Demand records. Don't let someone hide behind a title. Applause wasn't something I expected, but it happened anyway, brief but firm. A few neighbors clapped me on the back as I sat down. After the meeting, Greg, the retired firefighter, caught up with me in the parking lot. You know, I almost paid that fee, he said. Would have written the check without thinking twice if you hadn't raised hell. I shrugged. You shouldn't have to double-check every piece of mail just to make sure someone isn't robbing you, he nodded. Well, you saved us more than a few bucks. You gave people their spine back. That stuck with me. The next week, the neighborhood signs changed. Instead of the old vinyl banners with Alayna's scripted fonts and pastel colors, we got plain metal posts with clear, bold letters. Notices were pinned to the community board in public view, not slid into mailboxes on colored paper. The new board opened committee seats to volunteers. Residents voted on every proposed project, and every dime spent was logged online for anyone to see. A few weeks later, I got another call from Dana. We've recovered $27,000 from Alayna's accounts, she said. The rest, well, that might take longer, but restitution's in progress. The court's prioritizing payments to homeowners. I asked if she needed any more statements from me. No, she said. You've done your part, more than most would. I thought that was the end of it until early spring, when I received a letter not from the HOA or the city or even the county. It was from a homeowner in a completely different neighborhood, 2 counties over. She had read the public records from the case, seen my name listed in the affidavit, and tracked down my business. I just wanted to say thank you, the letter read. We had something similar happen here. You gave us the blueprint to fight back. Turns out, corruption in small associations wasn't as rare as people liked to think, but word was spreading. And for once, it wasn't the HOA setting the tone. It was the people who stopped backing down, and me. I went back to work, poured concrete, laid roads, built things that lasted. And every once in a while, when someone tried to tell me what I owed without proving a thing, I'd hand them a fresh invoice with itemized labor, materials, and a line at the bottom that read, "Nice try." By the end of April, the county's audit team had finished combing through every transaction the Willow Creek HOA had processed over the last 5 years. What started with a single fraudulent maintenance invoice had unraveled into a web of illegal activity deeper than anyone expected, including me. The findings were delivered during a closed-door session with the district attorney's office, but I received a call to appear the following morning. I walked into the courthouse conference room wearing work boots and a flannel shirt, still stained from a foundation pour earlier that morning. Dana Calder, the investigator who'd initially taken the case, greeted me with a nod. She handed me a printed summary and let me read through it in silence. Over $120,000 had been siphoned from association funds into 3 different shell entities. All of them were tied to Alayna Fairgrove or her immediate relatives. 2 of the LLCs had been dissolved shortly after receiving transfers. The third was still active and traced to a UPS box listed as a business suite. Most of the money had been laundered through small, fake contractor payments structured just under the reporting threshold. "She's not the only one named in the indictment," Dana said once I looked up. The former secretary and vice chair were aware. We have emails between them discussing how to categorize transfers to avoid attention. They even joked about calling it landscaping consultation. I folded my arms, so it wasn't just one person being greedy, it was a whole operation. Dana nodded. "We've issued warrants for all three. Charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, misuse of fiduciary authority, and falsifying municipal records." "And the money?" I asked. "We've frozen 2 accounts. Between asset seizures and court-ordered restitution, we should recover close to 80%. The remaining funds were withdrawn in cash or spent on personal expenses we're still tracing." I leaned back in the chair. "What about the residents?" The court's approving a structured repayment plan. Each household will receive a refund based on how much they paid into the fake projects. The settlement will be separate from any civil claims they want to pursue." I thanked her and left the courthouse, unsure whether to feel satisfied or furious. That evening, I stood on my porch watching the sun drop behind the row of homes across the cul-de-sac. Greg walked over, holding a clipboard with a stack of forms. "I just got back from Henry's," he said. "They're setting up a vote to rewrite the bylaws, strip out the emergency clauses that let the chair push things through without oversight." "About time," I said. "They're also adding term limits," he added. "No more 10-year reigns." I flipped through the paperwork. The proposals were clear, well-written, and most importantly, enforceable. I signed the bottom and handed the clipboard back. Greg didn't leave right away. He looked across the street toward the now vacant Fairgrove residence. "You know, my sister lives in a neighborhood over in Norcross. Her HOA tried to fine her for putting up a storm door. She fought it, won, and now they won't even send her newsletters." "They probably know better," I said. "Yeah, but it made me realize none of these boards expect anyone to push back. They count on silence." I looked at him. "That's usually how it starts, not how it ends." The next morning, I met with the interim board to discuss a new infrastructure project, an actual one this time. The city had approved funding for sidewalk extensions on the south side of the neighborhood, and my company had submitted a bid. I made it clear there'd be full transparency, itemized billing, and an open walkthrough before any work began. Marcia, who'd volunteered to manage community outreach, raised a hand during the meeting. "I've put together a mailing list for project updates," she said. "No more guessing what's being done or when." Henry nodded. "Good. From now on, if a single tree gets trimmed, the whole block will know about it before the clippers come out." Once the vote was unanimous, I packed up my plans and headed out. Later that week, I received a letter from the county clerk's office. It confirmed that the Willow Creek HOA had been placed under temporary oversight by the Department of Community Affairs. Until new elections could be held and bylaws ratified, every financial decision had to be cleared at the county level. I read the letter twice before folding it into a file labeled Resolved. But one last thing still bothered me. I hadn't seen or heard anything about Alayna since the warrant was executed. The news updates had gone quiet and even the local gossip had dried up. So I called Dana. "She's not in jail," Dana said, "but she's not walking free either. She posted bond and surrendered her passport. Her arraignment is scheduled for next month. Any chance she'll actually see time?" Dana hesitated. "Depends on whether she takes a deal or pushes for trial. But her attorney's hinting at cooperation. If she talks, we might find out if this was part of something larger. She's not the only HOA chair under investigation right now." That caught my attention. "You think there's more of this?" "We know there is," Dana said. "We've seen similar patterns in 2 other neighborhoods. Same method, fake invoices, small payments, no documentation. Your case helped us spot it." The rest of the call was short, but what she said stuck. This wasn't just about one HOA, it never had been. The following month, The new Willow Creek Board held its first community-wide planning session. No closed doors, no surprise notices, just folding chairs, coffee, and a chalkboard list of upcoming projects. Residents debated over whether to plant native grasses or ornamental shrubs near the entrance circle. Someone brought a platter of muffins. A teenager presented a plan for a new basketball hoop installation by the park. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody got fined for asking questions. As I packed up my notes and headed for the door, Henry caught up to me. "We're naming the new sidewalk extension after something symbolic," he said. "Not a person, something that means change." I raised an eyebrow. "Got a name in mind, Redline Way," I laughed. "Subtle. It'll remind the next board where the line is," he said. "And what happens when you cross it?" I stepped outside into the spring air, the sound of kids playing echoing from the nearby cul-de-sac. Things weren't perfect, they never would be, but they were fair now, accountable. And for once, the only thing getting paved in this neighborhood was the road.